Welcome to FitBody Lifestyle, the show where we dive deep into the world of fitness, health, business, relationships, and the art of living a balanced life. I'm Jami.
And I'm Greg, and we're here to give you the benefit of our experiences in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, the corporate world, running a business, personal development, and building healthy relationships.
Whether you're sweating it out in the gym, hustling in your business, or seeking balance in your everyday life, you're in the right place.
So lace up those sneakers and grab that water bottle, and let's get ready to transform our minds, our bodies, and our lives. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of FitBody Lifestyle, and this is part two of our conversation. Part two of our conversation with a very special guest, Miss Joanna Dara with Hormone Logics. And Joanna, just say hello to everyone. And I'm also my partner in crime here, my lovely wife, Jami.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
I'm here too.
Yeah.
Hi. But, introduce yourself, Joanna, in case people didn't hear your episode number one.
I am Joanna. I'm working with Hormone Logics now for the last 12 years. I am part of FitBody Fusion. Jami's been my coach since 2017, but more importantly, they have been friends and family of mine since then too.
And you keep us healthy.
I do.
Yes.
I do my best.
We are not just your friends. We are your patients.
Although she did remind us but during the break, we need to have our labs redone.
Do as I say, not as I do. Mm-hmm. You both do for labs. So
I'm getting mine taken Tuesday.
Uh-huh.
You're supposed to schedule mine too.
Okay. I failed.
So I'm really excited to dive into our topic today because we're going to talk about gut health. And I do think that this is something that people are becoming so much more aware of now. And we're really starting to realize, I think, we kind of came out of this time of like, oh, just take a Metamucil or take a Tums or whatever, it's like, oh, just kind of treat symptoms. Yeah. So talk a little bit about, what you're doing right now with gut health, with gut testing, and kind of introduce us to the topic a little bit.
Sure. And again, thank you guys for having me. It's always fun to sit on the couch with you guys and talk because it's basically what we do. But one of the things about gut health, the reason why we started bringing it in 4 years ago into Hormone Logics is because of the correlation with that whole theory of the full body, getting the full blueprint of everything going on. And we felt like there was still a missing piece, especially when you're talking about hormones, because just something as simple as a thyroid test, your thyroid levels make a conversion to a usable thyroid in your liver and in your gut. So if your gut's not healthy and we're seeing thyroid levels, like your T3 levels being low on your blood work, liver looks good, but what if it's just not making the conversion because the gut's not healthy? We were also finding, and not only in this sport, but in general or through menopausal, changes and stuff, the level of depression, 80% of our serotonin's made in our gut. So we just felt like it was a natural thing to just kind of bring in. Plus it was something that nobody else was doing. And we like to be ahead of the game because we always want to make sure that we have the totality of the health of the patient. So we brought in GI mapping, which ultimately is just, nobody likes to go to the gastro doctor and, tell them, oh, I have bloating or I'm constipated or I don't go every day. And it's like Jami said, right? Oh, well, I just take Metamucil. I've been taking it every day. Okay. How's that working for you? Because we're just still talking about your gut. Well, I go every day now, but if I don't take it, I can't go. Well, that's not normal. That's not normal. You shouldn't have to take stuff to make your body do what it's supposed to do, right? If it's not doing it, there's something wrong. Like something's broken. If it's not running, something's broken. You got to figure out what's broken, right? So this test was allowing for us to have the opportunity to work with patients all across the country still, but they could do this in the privacy of their own home, drop shipping a kit to them. But it was important for me to have actual quantitative data. So, I like numbers and being able to optimize. And if so many tests out there just say you don't have this or you do have this, but you have no other information. And this is a DNA-based test that allows for you to see the numbers. So it checks for over 150 different bacterias, both good, we have healthy bacteria, and opportunistic, the bad bacteria. It checks for parasites and worms, checks for protozoas in our body, but it checks for inflammation, small intestine, large intestine, colon. How many of the girls say, I'm just bloated right here, like just that lower belly area? That's your colon behind there. So yeah, that would be a part for you to be bloated if you're not going to the bathroom every day or having to take something to go. So But it also checks for inflammatory markers. And in addition to that, it will let me know if you, like, what your body needs, like what digestive enzyme you need, what type of probiotics you need. There's so many on the market. We could take so much of stuff because it is DNA based. So it utilizes virulence factors. What that means is it takes snips of your DNA to figure out what works perfectly for your body in regard to what they're seeing in the stool sample. Sample goes back, the pathologist comes up with the report, sends us the report, and then we have a GI doctor that we consult with on them. And then I've gone through all the certifications to read them properly with the GI doctor. Be cautious. There's places that they'll just do the test and then they're not like certified to read it. That's really important. I'm certified to read it, and you can have your plan of care written up for you on, what your body needs. But we've been able to find things that you wouldn't find even in a gastro doctor's. Like if you go to a gastrointestinal, they sometimes they're like, oh, these functional tests. Okay, well, that's great. But this functional test is telling me that I have really high calprotectin. Will you listen to me now? Because that's the test you give me for Cologuard. Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll listen to you now. Okay. So
Knowledge is power. Well, applied knowledge is power.
That's true. Thank you for correcting that.
Yeah. So I did want to ask how does somebody know whether or not this is something that would be helpful for them or that they should do? When should somebody consider a GI map?
Yeah. I think if somebody realizes that, going to the bathroom every day is supposed to happen, and if you're finding, every once in a while we get a little mildly constipated here or there, but if you're having reoccurring either pain or bloating, and I use the term loosely because there's a lot of things like certain foods could bloat you. Your time of the month for women can bloat you in some ways. But if you're finding that you're having that same reoccurring, it's like, no matter what I do, as clean as I eat, or I hit my fiber goals. That's when you should really dig a little bit deeper.
Well, and I'm going to go broader than that and just tell you and just suggest, and you tell me if I'm wrong. And full disclosure, Jami and I have both done a GI map, and Joanna, you've done a GI map. So we're not just advocating something that we have not done ourselves. We've done that ourselves. So the process is interesting, and I will
As
say
my
that.
husband says, you got a hot dog bowl from the hot dog at the baseball game, and you do your thing.
You poop on it, and then you have a little scooper, and you put it into the vial with the solution, and you send that off.
Not of the faint of heart.
Yeah, but it's not fun. All in all, it's not that bad.
You'll survive.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's not that bad. And the question I guess I would ask is how much is your health worth a little bit of discomfort in that moment of taking the test, but the insights that you get. So I would say, for me at least, Jami obviously came back because she's just a genetic freak. An anomaly. Yeah, like everything was normal. I had some opportunities that you've been helping me with, and these were things that, quite honestly, I didn't even think about them. They were not things that were in my present mind. They were not things that was bothering me. I've always been very regular. I've just not had any symptoms per se. But and so that begs the question, okay, then what value was the test that did show some opportunities? And the value with it was not that I had a major correction to do. It was that I became more optimized. And so the things that I've been doing have helped me just be a little bit better. Maybe not quite Jami better, but then again,
I don't know that anybody has Jami better.
Right? You guys are funny. Well, I mean, the thing with my GI map though is there were opportunities for me as well, because my good bacteria, although I didn't have any problems per se, then we found out that my good bacteria was a little bit low. So there was an opportunity then to take the correct probiotic.
And that's correct. And that's important.
Right. Because, and I do that, like I want to emphasize that because they're not all the same. So if you take the wrong one, it can actually cause
worse.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you think more is better. But, somebody's like, well, I'm taking 250 billion. And what do you take? Oh, you're only taking 125. I'm taking 250. That's great. If you're taking 250 and you're overgrowing your good bacteria too, like lactobacillus or things, like there's types of bacteria, you're doing yourself an injustice. So it's not I'm better than you. hey.
Well, it's a gut biome, so it's an ecosystem.
It is.
It's you can't have prey without predators. You've got to. I mean, in the ecosystem world, it's just everything kind of works in harmony, and it's getting to that harmonic balance that we're looking for, which otherwise called optimization.
Again, right. Well, and that's what I say. I'm like, I feel like in our commensal bacteria, which is our good bacteria in our gut, I say they all have jobs. We have an ecosystem. So they all have jobs. They have jobs that kind of have to intersect with each other in order for you to have balance. So, the good bacteria, some of it is to create, healthy, B vitamins. It's biotin, like creating vitamin K you get from healthy bacteria in your gut. Some of it is just to create one of the bacteria most people don't realize, it stops how do I put it in like most layman's terms? Like when you ever have like bubble guts where your belly goes and it hurt. Well, too much of that is what creates gas in the lining. So if you have an overgrowth of this one particular bacteria, it could continue to create that. And then that leads to leaky gut. And that's where leaky gut comes in. And we do tests.
What is leaky gut?
Leaky gut is leaky brain, leaky mind, leaky eyes, leaky everything. Leaky gut is, so when you have the lining of our gut, basically, think of it as wallpaper on the wall. I'll use my analogy. And if that wallpaper is up against the wall really, really good, if you take a soaking wet sponge and you soak a piece of that wallpaper on the back side of that wall, your water will absorb nutrients absorb, utilizing your nutrients properly when you take in food. But if you've ever seen wallpaper that has kind of like an air pocket on it and it's kind of popped off the wall, and you take you soaking wet sponge and soak that piece of the wallpaper, it never gets to the wall. But what it does is it kind of falls in between. That's our bloodstream. This is it's called the epithelial cells. And basically that's what makes up the gut's biome. When you have zonulin kind of gets in there, it's that air pocket. So it's now separating you. When you get in there, now you're not allowing for the nutrients to get into our blood, so we become malnutritioned, even though you think you're eating fine. You're not absorbing your vitamins. You're not absorbing your supplements. You're not absorbing your thyroid medication, certain things like that. But the other part of it is that leaky gut leaks out toxins into our bloodstream, which creates inflammation that could deteriorate. It's scary what leaky gut can do. But I will tell you, leaky gut and leaky brain are 100% a real thing. People that have leaky gut, they always complain. Like high levels of like zonulin, people are complaining all the time. They're like, I am so forgetful. I just don't feel myself. I feel very heavy in the head. Like I just can't remember what I'm doing when I'm walking in a room. I'm tired of being told that it's just my age. Leaky gut is real and it's damaging. People that there have a whole study that they just did on leaky gut for elderly drivers. Like they were doing a study on elderly people that have leaky gut and driving in a car, and they could be perfectly fine. And the people that are driving in the car with leaky gut create more car accidents. I deep dive in crazy stuff like you know. So, but I was like, wow. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but they blame it on these people being old, that they shouldn't be driving, but nobody looked at, they say, it's your cognitive ability. It's just they're older. It's their cognitive ability. But they did this whole thing, and obviously, it's just a study that I found because I deep dive. But, this test is able to tell us that. The other part of this test that it's able to tell is something called anti-gliadin. So how many times do you hear you shouldn't eat gluten? It's not good for you. Well, why is it not good for you? Well, gluten is usually part of processed foods. It's a glue. It's a binding. Like we don't need it, all that stuff. But when you see it and somebody's anti-gliadin, which is a component of gluten, is sky high, usually you see leaky gut and you go, oh, your calprotectin levels are high too, where your colon is, which is why your distension in your lower belly is. Stop eating gluten. Now do you believe me? Well, I'm not allergic to it. I never said you were allergic. I said you're reactive, because that's what anti-gliadin is. It's a reactivity to gluten in your diet. So again, analogy, you get stung by a bee. You're allergic to bees. You get stung, the area gets red, raised, raw, but you're allergic, anaphylactic shock. You could die from it. But I get stung by a bee. I'm reactive. Red, raised, raw, itchy, hot to the touch, hurts. But my throat's not closing up. I'm reactive. And then there's somebody that gets stung by a bee and he's like, oh, okay.
Nothing happens.
And nothing happens. Reactivity can cause more after effect, or say the collateral damage, than sometimes even being allergic to it. Because if you're allergic to it, you're super, I won't touch it. I won't go near it. I'll make sure that they're not cooked in that oil. I mean, I am truly celiac allergic. When you're reactive to something, the damage is worse sometimes because you truly are not paying attention to your surroundings. So you'll walk into a beehive not realizing that there's one above you, whereas that's what we do with our food. So as soon as somebody cleans up and they see the numbers and then they go, oh, this is why I didn't even know you had a gluten intolerance or you were gluten reactive. I'm just telling your symptoms seem that way and you didn't want to believe me. Well, here's your documentation of it. So, but if you're inflamed, you can't go to the bathroom, you know?
It's interesting because I think because gut health is kind of like coming to the forefront, people are talking a lot more about it. I do see a lot of people calling themselves gut specialists out there and not doing GI mapping, or, you know, if they are, like you said, not being certified to read it. And then they're diagnosing people without this type of information. And that's something that's a little scary to me. I've heard of people, assuming someone has SIBO, for example. And then
so hard to test for SIBO.
Right.
So hard to get that diagnosis.
Let's talk about what SIBO is before we.
Small intestinal overgrowth bacteria. So in the small intestine, the bacteria overgrows. Acronym SIBO. But it's so hard to test for SIBO. Like you have to do this strategic breath test that you have to blow a certain way with a certain amount of hours after each breath, a certain amount of seconds breathing in. Don't eat a certain food. Like and it is so easily wavered. Just because you have overgrowth in the small intestine doesn't mean you have SIBO. So SIBO is a very
specific.
Discrete.
Yeah.
Right.
So when somebody's like, well, I've got SIBO, I'm like, well, why do you have SIBO? How do you know
and
that?
how do you know that?
How do you know?
Right. And that
Because somebody told me I did.
Right. And that kind of concerns it does concern me because I do know, there have been situations where we've had somebody who does a GI map and maybe we find out they've got candida or we find out there's something else. And so, there are different protocols for different issues. So I know people are looking for the one size fits all solution to things, but like you were saying, human body is very complex. So, what kind of advice do you have for people, that are kind of in this situation? Maybe they've gone to somebody who's a gut guru or whatever, and, is wanting to put them on certain protocols. Because I do like to warn, like there are those people out there that are just trying to sell whatever products they've got.
That was the first thing. Look at the label of the product and see where it comes from first that they're pushing on you. I can't tell you enough how often we see people on things that are private labeled that the person's making the money or it's their product. There's companies out there that they are gut gurus and all of the products they're pushing on you are their products too. I'd like to say that's double dipping, but but that's the first thing, honestly. Like, be aware of what's being pushed on you. I'm not saying everybody's like that.
Right. There's great people out there.
There's great people out there. Yeah. Somebody who's willing to talk to you and go through it with you and really educate you based on what you have symptoms on. Gut's a little bit different than the blood because with the gut, the bacteria, people say, oh, it could change. Yeah, your gut bacteria can change just like your hormones can change. But your gut bacteria, you've got to listen to the patient of how long their problem's been going on, what their symptoms are. Those are real things. Like if your symptom has been, I've been taking Metamucil to go to the bathroom every single day, there's a bacteria called the methane bacteriacea. It is methane gas. So think hard, distended gas, like methane gas. It is the number one cause of constipation. Okay, well, what if you have that? Guess what? You take an antimicrobial, we can get rid of that for you. That doesn't mean everybody should just go take antimicrobials because now you're wiping out all your good bacteria too. So there's a whole nother downside to that too. I wish I could just say, everybody take an antimicrobial and our bellies will all be better. And that's not the case because if you're not taking the right amount, you could also be wiping out your good bacteria because it doesn't differentiate. It just knows bacteria. So there's a science behind it, which is what
there's also a balance behind it, right?
Yes, of
and
course.
and I think in part one we talked a little bit about fear being a major impediment to people advocating for themselves with their physicians. And on the other side of that spectrum, we have people who are suffering from whatever condition they may have, and they're looking for an answer. And in the search for that answer, they become vulnerable to suggestions and that confirmation bias of, oh wow, this makes sense, this all lines up, and maybe it does and maybe it doesn't. And I think that if you've struggled with something for so long, and you are looking for an answer, you will take any answer, and it just may not be the right answer. And so I do think making sure that something is actually what it is, especially when we're talking about the gut, because the gut is just gut does not exist on an island. It's part of a complex human body and the ecosystem, and especially in our sport, there's this mindset of more is better. And so, I don't have this issue. I don't have this issue, but you know what? I'm going to take this antimicrobial because I don't want to get this issue. And it's like, well, okay, no, you're now going to create an issue that you didn't have. Right. So I think, with supplementation, that becomes a real opportunity.
Less
and
is more
issue.
with supplements, for sure. All supplements, like less is more. And though, if anybody ever watched my videos of me like doing my pills every month, which I do for both him and I, once a month I sit down and do all my pills because it's the only way I'll stay organized. It looks like wow, that's a lot of pills. That's a lot of, supplements that you're taking. And it does, but over the course of a week, where ones are 5 days a week and some of them are every other day, that's why. So it does look a lot, but they all have a purpose. A purpose. Like it's what I need.
Right.
And it's what my blueprint needed. So, if you have that, which is another blueprint of your gut, you had mentioned Candida earlier. There's supplements out there that can help to treat Candida. But what most people don't know is if you don't check for H. pylori, you're going to keep getting back that Candida because Candida hides inside of H. pylori. So it could look like it's gone, but also H. pylori hides inside of Candida. H. pylori is a pain sometimes that we get in this upper left quadrant, and it creates in the initial, it's like a hypochloridria is what it causes, which is low HCl. Everybody knows, not everybody, but most people know HCl is hydrochloric acid. It's what we use in most of our digestive enzymes. It breaks down the foods. So we're taking a bunch of that, but if you're not taking that, your body makes it. Well, your body's making it to do a job. If H. pylori grows and lives off of it and is eating it, guess what's happening? It's not doing its job. Well, in the process of that happening, after a little bit, you become hyperacidria, acid reflux. Well, what does everybody do? Well, my doctor told me to take whatever the acid reflux medicine is. I try to block it out of my mind.
Omeprazole.
Exactly, that one. I tried to block it out of my mind, but that one again, that's it. But you take it, but you're having reflux because your body is telling you it doesn't like something. There's something not there. It's that's not normal. It might be
so
your
you're just
normal,
putting a Band-Aid on it,
and
basically.
you're putting a Band-Aid on it. So I'm not saying that,
because if you were to treat the H. pylori, then your
your
HCl would increase,
and then HCl would increase. Hyperacidria goes down, and then guess what happens? You don't need to take that stuff.
I think we started talking about this at the outset, but I want to go back to this because I think this is really important for people. As I'm putting myself in the shoes of listening to this and thinking, okay, but the WIFM, what's in it for me, and why is this important to me? And I think part of it that is underrepresented is gas, stomach issues, constipation. These are all important things. Yeah. But let's go back to the hormone piece of this, because that hormone junction with the gut is so important and so not necessarily talked about as much. I don't hear a lot of talk about it at least, but and I'm not going to tell you I listen to everything, but I think this is one of the areas that really intrigued me more in the GI mapping and just the understanding of the importance of the gut.
Yeah. So I mean, our hormones obviously, the gut is a big player in how the hormones communicate with our body. So that's kind of the call center of it all. It kind of goes there, and then everything sort of goes out from there. So that's the epicenter in a sense. One of the biggest things about the hormones is your estrogen levels, men and women alike. So how many women are like, oh, I'm estrogen dominant, which most of them are not, but they say they are. But you see it and you're like, okay, I'm estrogen dominant. That's great. So they take an estrogen blocker, or they take an over-the-counter like a DIM or something along those lines. And I was actually just having this conversation with Drew this morning about it. If you take that, that's great. Your blood work may come back showing it being a little bit lower, but where did it go? If your beta-glucuronidation pathway, which is the second pathway of release in your gut, doesn't release it because it's blocked up. If beta-glucuronidation is a pathway where it releases the toxins, especially estrogens from the body. So if it's backed up, guess what? All of those same symptoms for women, bloating, thickness, kind of watery retentiveness, is still there. The blood work doesn't show it. Well, I'm taking DIM. How come it's not going away? My numbers don't look high. Well, you're not getting rid of it. Urine, sweat, and feces. If it's not coming out, it's still staying in. That's what we're doing. All we're doing is taking another supplement to lower a number that we think is going to work.
But we're raising your overall toxicity.
Yeah. And then again, that beta-glucuronidation pathway is a pathway of release of all toxins, but mostly your estrogens. And with men and women alike, if we're not releasing the estrogens, very high levels of this are even linked to cancer. And when you see these numbers, sometimes, you have to really understand the patient again. This is why education is important, and why hormones education is important also when learning about the gut, because if somebody's number's really high, that doesn't always mean, oh gosh, it's the worst. It also means, hey, where are you in your cycle of life? Are you taking hormone replacement therapy? Have you ever taken as a man, have you taken testosterone, and without an estrogen blocker, you've converted to estrogen? There's so much more to it, but the play in it itself, well, now how do you fix it? Calcium diglucarate. Calcium diglucarate is the magnet to pull it out. Again, not with everybody, but knowing that, again,
for me.
It's for you and for Drew that I was talking with this morning. Like, we were having this conversation. Most people, it's just a simple bit of knowledge, but you have to have the data. It doesn't work for everybody. You have to have the blueprint. I use the analogy of the house. You have your dream house, you buy it, but you buy the house, but in Pinterest, you have your dream kitchen and your dream bathroom. Well, if you just walk in the house and go, hey, I got my shell, and just start banging out walls without a blueprint, you're going to knock out a wall that has electricity or plumbing, or you wouldn't do that, right? But we as humans, we're like, oh, he takes that, so I'm going to try it, and I'm going to try that too, or I'm not going to worry about that. But you just went to go knock down a wall, and all your plumbing for your kitchen is in it because you didn't have the blueprint. So that's why it's always important. You don't have to be sick, just like with blood work, to get a baseline of your gut and to see where your bacteria is at, and to know what supplements are right for me. Because I'm confused. I'm confused going out there. I don't really have a lot going on, but I know that I've taken antibiotics before. I know I need to be on a probiotic. Which one? I don't know. There's 90,000 of them out there. Which one's right for me? Getting just the blueprint to figure it out, what you need for you for optimization.
And that's why I did it.
Yeah.
Because I don't have, digestion wise, I'm feeling good. I'm not bloated, things like that. But I wanted to know, what was my blueprint? And also, if something down the road were to start to go awry, then kind of what we also talked about with blood work, I have a baseline idea of what I typically look like. So if something starts to look off, then I'll know, I can go back and get another test and then be able to compare.
Right. Absolutely. And it also gives you kind of that feeling of, okay, I know I feel good, but I know that I'm good. So now I don't need to somebody's taking that gut protocol or something. Well, that looks fun. Should I try that? No. Some people just try everything, and then you try everything.
If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Don't fix it. And if it's not broken, leave it as it is, But the test itself it was kind of the nail for us, because now it's taken us to all the different doctors in so many ways. I can talk about mine. I just came back. Stress is a huge player. Stress is a hormone. It's a stress hormone. Blood work my cortisol levels usually show pretty low because my adrenals are fatigued. And mostly that comes from the thyroid cancer. Like I've pulled the engine out of the car, so I'm trying to run a car on just adrenaline alone, on gas alone that doesn't have an engine. So it's constantly just pushing and it's not going anywhere. So there's that side of it. But I carry my stress in my gut. And if somebody internalizes their stress, and it may not be in their blood work, and they internalize their stress, you're going to have the same symptoms in the gut. And again, I go back to that same thing, mental health. Why I love that people talk about it more now, because that's so important to me that people talk about it. But the way that even the understanding of how much your vagus nerve, that nerve is here and here. So it goes to here and it's generating all the way. And if this isn't healthy, how is this going to be healthy? How's this going to be healthy? How's your thyroid going to make the conversion? How many people go to the doctor and they say, I'm depressed? Okay, we've already talked about it, about hormones. Well, they didn't check that. But did they ask you, how's your gut? When 80% of your serotonin's made in your gut, if your gut's not healthy, how are you going to possibly feel healthy? When did you start feeling sad? Like, when did this start happening? Right around the time that X, Y, and Z happened. Okay, what was your diet like? Oh, yeah.
Right. Or somebody that got sick and had to take
antibiotics,
some really strong antibiotics. And I mean, there's so many things that can affect the gut that you're absolutely right. And sometimes not realizing that those are connected, then why am I now dealing with some depression or some anxiety or some of these other things that are going on? And then, I do think it's interesting that, because our doctors are all specialized in certain areas,
right.
If you go to a doctor, a psychiatrist, they're going to treat the mental side of things. They're not, they would never dream of suggesting you.
That's always, I would say, but why? Like, why wouldn't you ask? But they don't, because that's not their specialty. And that's what we were saying, even with blood work, you see all of the different doctors on that one page. And luckily we've got the training and the doctors that can look at the blood work but it's the same thing with the gut, but none of them talk to each other unless you have one place at one time, and that theory of rule out and find out.
Well, in fact, I think that is a trend in medicine, but you're not seeing it in the United States yet.
Yeah.
I've seen it international where people, and I was just seeing somebody went to, I think, to Dubai for this, where they go in for a comprehensive medical evaluation where they are seen by a GP, they're seen by an endo, they're seen by a cardiologist, they're seen by a nephrologist.
Yeah, they go from room to room.
They go from room to room, right, for that holistic evaluation, and which isn't the top point I wanted to make, but I do think that's interesting as a development on the forefront, or on the somewhere down the road here. I think we'll catch up with that. But we talked a little bit where you guys must be both reading my mind or my notes, because we talked about the gastric issues that you may be manifesting. We talked about the hormonal issues that you may be manifesting as originating from the gut. And let's talk a little bit more about that emotional thing, because we've seen that in a number of our athletes that they are. I think everybody's heard this phrase of, where do you hold your tension? And when you're holding it in your neck or your back, most people are very aware of that, but most people are completely unaware when they're holding that tension in their gut. And so this gut-brain axis, which is becoming much more talked about, I think, and rightly so, is that emotionally, you can be holding that tension in your gut, and that can affect your biome, that can affect your gut response, that can affect your hormones, but it can be emotionally driven as much as with physical symptoms. And none of us here are qualified psychiatric or psychological professionals, but
we're all
we do
human.
see it. But we do see it.
Yeah,
we see
feel it.
Yes,
and feel it, because most of us have been there, and that's the other thing too. It's like, how much of that is as from an empathetic person, because I have empathy, I'm that type of person, but how much of it is you're recognizing what you've been through and you're like, it sounds familiar.
right.
And it's not the same, but it does sound familiar. And this is my experience with it. And I get it. Like, I get what you're going through, but I don't know that it's this, but we should rule this out, because that's what we're supposed to do. But I think we're leaning more towards this. And how is your gut? Like,
Right.
I've been depressed. And I know when it was really depression. I know when you lose somebody, or that week that I sat alone in a room with saran wrap on.
How would you not be affected by that?
You can't even type on a computer because you're not allowed to touch anything. Like, Everything had to be cleared. You're alone in a room. Can't have animals, can't have, I mean, I had a burner phone. I felt like.
No, and you're fighting cancer.
And you
alone
have to think about it
right.
like over and over and over. And they, my doctor was great. They have like a mental health. They have a counselor that I'm like, I have my therapist like on speed dial in my life, just because I think therapy's great. But like that moment, that was true depression. But then I think back, was it? I just went through surgery. I just took a bunch of antibiotics. I wasn't thinking like that in 2018. I didn't really, I hadn't dove deep enough.
And it's not just depression, that's trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, that's trauma. I mean, when your body is when you go through a surgery, there's trauma associated with that. When you are sitting in the clean room, so to speak, there is a trauma associated with that. How that manifests, how that trauma then manifests, whether it's depression or something else, that's still trauma to your system. And to think that it's not going to manifest or have some impact on you, I mean.
Well, but the other side of it that you're saying is that, yes, that makes sense from the psychological standpoint, but also how much was the physical side of it?
How much was the physical side of it too? I have no doubt that where I was sitting was, you do that whole, I could die and my son could be without his mom and I'll never see him walk down the aisle and I'll never be a grandmother. And you go down this rabbit hole of, my mother will lose her mind if she loses her daughter. And like all of this crazy stuff you think, and then you're like, knock it off. You're healthy. You're going to be fine. You caught it in time. You advocated for your health. But that moment, like my gut was terrible, like terrible, terrible. And I was bloated but the doctors were like, well, that's the anesthesia, okay, that's fine. But what did the anesthesia do to my gut that now here I am a year later because I was still dealing with gut stuff in 2019? Like it's because you don't have your thyroid. Your thyroid is your metabolism and that's what makes you go to the bathroom, right? I'm like, well, yeah, but no, yeah, I take medication. So I'm living just like I had a thyroid, only synthetically. So that's not my answer. So what else is going on? And then you kind of dive a little bit deeper into the gut. And it was in, 2020 where I was like, I'm going to bring this in. This is a perfect time. 2020, everybody was getting healthy because everybody wasn't healthy. The people that were really, really sick were the ones that weren't healthy, and the ones that were able to survive through the worst time of our country's ever seen, they decided 90, however many percentage it was, decided to jump in and say, this is time for my health. I saw more people go into take care of their health during 2020 than I had ever seen since being in this industry since 2012. So it was a blessing in that sense, but it was that point where I was like, there's depression, there's so many sad people, there's financial burdens, there's all this, but it's not just like, let's dig deeper. And when I came to me, I was like, I have the time. I'm gonna go through this course. And it was great. It was a great course to go through. It was educating. It was confusing and a lot of information. And I mean, you use words that you sound like you're talking to a different language. I'm like, oh, that's a pretty big word. How do you say that again? But it's a type of bacteria. And that one bacteria could be causing half of the stuff I'm feeling. How do I fix it? And how do I help other people do it? Because this is the missing link to I've got endocrinology, gynecology, rheumatology, general medicine in my blood work. This is that missing link. And once you realize that you can trust your gut and believe in your gut and trust it, you make the efforts. And when your gut test comes back, you make the changes you need to make and find out what you need to do for you and go from there.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I love learning about all this. I think too that like whatever we really dive into and do so frequently, because it's like one thing to go through the courses, it's another thing to be every single day reading these results, helping people recover, seeing what's working, what's not working. And I think, it's so interesting to be able to watch what you're doing and be part of that and see people getting healthy and getting over some of these things that they, didn't understand that were going on with their bodies. So, I think that's why we love, having you here and appreciate so much your expertise and what you bring into this, because wow, what a revelation that this GI mapping has been, and if properly utilized, life-changing.
Yeah. And there's plenty of places that do GI mapping, but there's a couple of questions you always want to ask. It's like, everybody wants to find the cheaper one to do. I'm like, okay, there's a reason why it's cheaper.
You get what you pay for.
You get what you pay for, yes. But also there are markers that will get left off of tests if it's less money, ask what tests are on it, because you won't have virulence factors on it. You won't have zonulin. If you don't know that you need a leaky gut test on it, you're not going to know.
But Joanna, go deeper on that, because I'm just, again, I'm putting myself in the seat of somebody listening to this, and okay, ask what tests are included on that. But if nobody's ever even heard of GI mapping before this podcast, or is just getting into it, how do they know which ones to ask for?
I would just say, is this an all-inclusive test? Does it include your zonulin, and does it include your virulence factors, which is the DNA SNPs to check for. If you have H. pylori, it will be able to tell us if you have a DUDA. H. pylori could trigger a duodenal ulcer because you have that SNP in your DNA. It'll also check for antibiotic-resistant strands. So let's just say you have H. pylori and a doctor puts you on triple therapy or quadruple therapy, general medicine puts you on, or gastro puts you on actual antibiotics for it, but you have 3 SNPs of amoxicillin being there that you're resistant to, well, guess what? It's not going to work. Right. Funny story, I did my GI mapping the first time, 2020. I was a little girl. I used to get ear infections all the time. My mom, back and forth, the bubblegum medicine, they put you back on that amoxicillin. It was great. Ended up having tubes, all the things that you do, all the things. Hindsight, here I am doing my first GI mapping. I've got all 3 SNPs of the amoxicillin resistant gene.
Useless.
So my mother would have never known when I was 5, 45 years, or at that point, 40 years ago. But you weren't doing that kind of testing. But it makes sense. I'm like, well, that explains all that extra antibiotic we're giving kids. Is it, and it's not working. There's a reason why it's not working.
Right.
But we have that. And that goes more into depth with DNA, which is sort of our next leap with Hormone Logics. We're going to do a little bit more of that. But we also need to make sure that whatever we do is simple, so that people can take the information and use it. I dumb down to the point of saying the same thing over and over.
Make it digestible.
Make it digestible. That is it.
No pun intended.
Pun intended.
Yes.
And the reason I say that is because, listen, it's very easy. I'm going to speak for myself. It's very easy to feel dumb in this space. It's part of the reason why I'll go down rabbit holes to try to seek understanding and educate myself. But at the same time, it's like, look, it's okay to recognize that there are people that can help you with this information and allow you to digest it in a way that. And yes, I'm using digest purposefully here because we're talking about the gut. But I also want people to be able to, as we talk about, it's not just knowledge is just knowledge. If you can't apply that knowledge, so if I go for a GI map and you give me all this knowledge about what my levels are and where my opportunities are, but I'm unable to apply that. For example, the gluten reaction that I have. Okay,
right.
So if I don't know what to do at that point, well, then, great, I got all this knowledge. But if I don't know that, okay, I got to really be watchful of the gluten that I intake. And when I do intake it, I got to be mindful of, am I experiencing symptoms from that? Is that an indication of the reaction that I'm having to that? But we've got to make it consumable, digestible, because if it's not a question about being dumb or smart. It's a question of let people, do what they do.
Well, use the information.
That's right.
And if you can't use it, then, and that's within anything you do. So when, again, going back to making sure that if the person's going to read it, if somebody's willing to give you your results and say, you have a choice if you want to read it with us or not.
That's a problem.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Because, I think I could do it on my own. I don't want to pay any extra money to read it. It costs people's time, So if you have to pay extra money to read it, if they're giving you an option to not read it, and they're comfortable with that?
Well, and you said this when we were talking about blood panels in particular, and this related topic here, which is that, look, hormone replacement, testosterone replacement, those are options, but they're not required. And so there are other options. And one of the things that I really love about Hormone Logics, and yes, whatever you want to call this, PSA or advocacy for you guys, but this is what I've always appreciated about the approach, is that it's not just about hormone replacement. It's about what supplementation can we do to optimize you that don't require you to do an injection if you don't want to do an injection. And I think that is really important, and it aligns with what you're talking about with the gut testing, which is, look, there's things that we can do short of medication. Jami was talking about her mom and progesterone being low as well. Her mom could have been given an Ambien or Wellbutrin, or
which they tried.
Right, which they did.
Well, she tried everything.
Right,
yeah, she tried everything.
But there are options to that, and you should know what options there are, because yes, throwing a medication at it may help, but it may not address the root cause. And so we need to look at this holistically, which I think is really the underlying tone.
I think if you have options, then you can make a decision better as a human. Like, I think if you walk into a store and there's only one thing there, you're really kind of pushed into a corner. You're like, oh. But I would walk out of the store because I'd be feeling I was forced to buy that one thing that I was like, are there other things? I'll be online and see if, we all do it.
Right.
You have to have options. You have to see what fits somebody. I've had how many girls come and they like, I don't want to take any hormone replacement. I do not want, or you're 25 years old. You do not need, I know your testosterone levels are low, but your growth plate hasn't even closed yet. I could promise you these levels, you're at the prime. Like, give me a second. Let's work on you from a more supplement type. Let's get to the levels of your supplements first. Let's see what we can do to raise and optimize those and see what your body does in response to it.
Right.
And then we can talk about it later on. But if you start on something this early on that you really didn't need, then what are you going to do when you're 50? Because 25 years ago, I don't know, the last 25 years I would have been able to keep up with all of the stuff that I was supposed to be doing. Plus, our bodies change so much. So if you can start with the less is more theory, but know that you have options. I'll have girls that come to me and we'll start them on that. And then all of a sudden they're like, I was talking to my coach and I'm really and these are women that are in their 40s that are like, they adamant, I don't want testosterone. Okay. I mean, you're below 3. Everything you've said is low testosterone, but okay. Your cortisol's been high. We're going to bring down your cortisol. We're going to fix your gut because you're storing your stress. We got to get to that because this is the first thing. And then your DHEA comes up. It'll convert to testosterone. We'll add a little DHEA and we'll see how you're. And 6 months? I was thinking maybe. Then we're on the creams. And then it's like, myself, I've been on the creams for a couple of years. I mean, how bad would the injection be at this point? Like, it's having the tiers, having the ability, and making sure that the patient, wherever it is, that they're comfortable with their options. Because if you don't know, you're not going to be able to make an educated decision.
And the beauty of options is that I can do the more conservative approach, more conservative option, and then, okay, that didn't work. Then I can take a more aggressive approach.
Or if it wasn't enough.
Or it wasn't enough, right? And then I can scale that up and get to where I need to be. But get the right size for the, square peg, square hole. And I love the way that you're describing that.
Yeah. And everyone is different. And what everybody needs is different, and just because a lab result says one thing doesn't necessarily mean, if there's no symptoms, different people feel like, we see that with thyroid all the time. Somebody could have, a lower reading, but their metabolism is fine. They feel great, or vice versa. There's, or somebody could be in the high part of the range and getting, it's just, it varies so much from person to person. So I think it is important to take all that into account, and then that education, and then people need to take some ownership and make some decisions that feel
Life changes.
Well, that's the biggest thing. I mean, I can, our doctors will prescribe you whatever you're supposed to be prescribed. I can give you all the supplementation information that you need. I can help you. But if you don't execute, if you don't go home and get to the root cause being your diet, your lifestyle, how you deal with stress, we're going to be like this in that little, the little
hamster wheel.
Yeah, hamster wheel, just going and going and going, because you'll feel better, and then you get the ones that I felt so much better before. Well, what did we do? Were we doing different when you were feeling better? well, X, Y, and Z. Well, I felt like I was doing good. I included a little bit of gluten back in and it wasn't a big deal. And I'm like, okay, how long have you been? Well, I've been having more gluten than I've thought. Okay, how about we just go back to the basics and remove the gluten again? And again, gluten might not be the answer for everybody, but it is a pretty it's a pretty common denominator in a lot of issues. Even with thyroid, with autoimmune. People ask all the time, why with Hashimoto's do you have to not take in gluten? It's silly. Because looking under a microscope, you want the science? I'll give you the science. And under a microscope, a gluten molecule looks almost identical to a T4 molecule, which is your thyroid. So if Hashimoto's job is to attack healthy thyroid tissue, well, it thinks there's more healthy thyroid tissue if it looks exactly the same. So it keeps going after your thyroid more and more and more, and it attacks that healthy thyroid tissue, and then you end up in hypothyroidism. With the gut, it's the same thing. With people that have celiac it's the autoimmune itself that lies dormant in our system, that rears its ugly head in whatever facet. Addison's, Hashimoto's, Graves', celiac, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, whatever the autoimmune is, it's going to rear its ugly head at some point, and it's going to attack that weakest organ. For us, if that is lying there underlying autoimmune and your gut's not healthy, you're leaving it vulnerable for a quick attack. And if you're not checking that side, then now we've got two open-ended, you're like this, and it's constantly filtering out and nothing's staying contained. You're just going to be setting yourself up for a long, long, long journey of that hamster wheel again. So I feel like, it's good for everybody to do a test, but it's really good for somebody who wants to know what's best for them because they're confused. They want to know what's right for them. But somebody is saying, I've got a little bloating, but it's been consistent for a year now. Or I go to the bathroom the minute I eat something. It's a lot of our guys. They think it's fine. It's like, yeah, I go to the bathroom the minute I eat. I'm like, that's not normal. Like, you're not supposed to just rush. Like, an emergency rush to the bathroom is a problem too, But I feel like anybody that wants to know more about themselves and have the data, and there's a chance that they can get to the next level of optimization, it's for everybody.
And I think that's a great way to wrap up this episode. And the one thing I just want to make sure I foot stomp and advocate for is that behavioral changes really are at the center of all of this. And one behavior is getting your labs. And the other behavior is that if you're having gut issues, get a GI map. But these behaviors may not require supplementation, and they may not require medication. They may just require some lifestyle changes, revisions, great way of saying it, to help you be better. So I really love that. And I think that's a great way to end. And let's tell people how to get a hold of you and Hormone Logics.
Yeah, so if you want to find out a little bit about us, you can always just go on to hormonelogics.com, read about us, any of the lifestyle and hormone specialists that we have there. And then on that webpage, you can actually click on it and you can type in your name for more information, a contact sheet. You can say where you saw us, FitBody Fusion podcast. We have men that work there as well. So if you're a male and feel more comfortable with the men, just say that you saw it here and we'll make sure that you're with the right hands. We put you with the right person. Or if you don't want to get on there, you can always go on to info@hormonelogics.com. But the webpage will always direct you in the right way. And if you want to work with somebody in particular, you could just say that you want to work with somebody in particular.
It has been a privilege to have you here. And we're going to have you back. So we'll just tease that right now. We're going to have you back for a few months from now, but we're also going to do a couple fusion hacks after this. So look for those. And remember to like, comment, subscribe, leave your review.
Listen to you.
I know I got that right. And be good to yourself.
Be good to each other.
And be safe. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to FitBody Lifestyle. We hope today's episode has left you feeling motivated and equipped to tackle your fitness goals, business challenges, and the daily dance of life. Remember to value progress over perfection. Life's tough enough alone. Find the chosen family around you to help you along the way.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FitBody Fusion.